Among things with souls, find me, writes Amiri Baraka. I am good or I am bad, find me, writes George Oppen. In a year of so much personal and collective loss, I hope it is not too late to allow ourselves to rejoice at this finding of the heretofore lost Neruda. Finding these poems was, as it turns out, just the first step of the journey, especially in their transmission into English. Of his first audition as translator for this project, Then Come Back, Forrest Gander writes with characteristic forthrightness, I considered what I'd need to give up to focus on a job like this. What do I ever give up to take on a translation project? My own writing goes on hold, but when eventually I come back to it, I bring to it something new, a feral vocabulary I've adopted from the translation, a fresh set of syntactical and rhythmical strategies, the image repertoire of someone else's imagination. I always come back from translation changed. When the glowing screen revealed the lost poems, hours suddenly clipped by in minutes. As I translated the first 3 poems, the truth is that I disappeared from myself. I was concentrated entirely into the durable moment of translation, which begins in humility, a sublimation of the self so extreme that the music of someone else's mind might be heard. And for a while, no remnant of me existed outside of that moment. As many of you who've had the good fortune to correspond with Forrest may know, the word fourth is an essential part of Forrest's email handle. Fourth is in many ways, in his work as a poet, translator, traveler, mentor, professor, and friend, the preposition of his being. Thank you, Forrest, on behalf of us all, for bringing this forth.
Just a lot of dear friends here. In fact, there's only about 3 people that I haven't paid to come here. And Ted Dreiser's one of them. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm assuming most of you probably haven't seen this book of Neruda's, and the question is it any good? And I have an argument to make by reading it that I hope will be convincing. So the sequence happened rather quickly between the time that Neruda's widow and the curator of the Neruda estate decided to go through all these boxes of books and manuscripts and correspondence, just lots and lots of boxes, and started finding things that no one remembered, no one had seen before. Some of them typed up and edited, and some of them written by hand on the back of menus and musical programs, and some with incomplete punctuation. And when they came out in Mexico and Spain 2 years ago, I remember reading about them, and I just, that sounded awful to me, really. I thought, just you get to be an important poet, and there's nothing that you get to keep private. This is surely stuff you never would have wanted published. And then the reviews came out in Spain and Latin America, and the reviews are really good. And then I was interested in taking a look at it. So this is what I'll treat you to tonight, is that thing Brecht says, will there be singing in the dark times? Yes, we will sing of the dark times. Neruda's also singing of some dark times in some of these poems, but Others are poems of love, which are also, it seems to me, one way of facing the dark times. What Gertrude Stein did with Lifting Belly during World War II, to remember Eros. If you get this book and don't have me sign it, you still have to go to page 23 and cross out the A in carried and replace it with a U for curried. It's the only mistake I found in the book. So this poem, I'll get this going. And to keep track of the time, it's 6:15, 6:18. This poem was found in a notebook with odes written on the front cover in 1956, the year of my birth, on the first page. There's the beginning of a draft to Matilda, his last wife, that goes like this. You are not made of dreams, is my translation. You are not made of dreams, beloved love, and held to the light, you're like an agrarian grape. Una uva agraria, pretty bad line, crossed out. And then on the next page, there's some more crossed out lines. And then there's this. Never alone, with you over the earth, crossing through fire. Never alone, with you in the forests, finding again dawn's stiff arrow, the tender moss of spring. With you in my struggle, not the one I chose, but the only one. With you through the streets and sand, with you, my love, my exhaustion, the bread, the wine, poverty, and glint of one coin, wounds, sorrow, happiness, all the light, shadow, stars, all the cut wheat, the corollas of giant sunflowers defeated by their very fullness, the cormorant's flight nailed to the sky like a coastline cross, all the space, the autumn, the carnations, never alone, with you, never alone, with you, earth, with you, the sea, my life, all I am, all I give and everything I sing, the substance of this love, the earth, the sea, bread, a life. This next poem is an interesting poem to me because there's nothing in Neruda's work that's anything like Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, except for this, which was only just found. And it's really sort of a letters to himself as a young poet, from the older poet. It's discovered in a book of manuscripts that include his Ode to Walt Whitman. Even in these steep years, with a clear view of the mountain range of my life, after having climbed the vertical snow and reached the diaphanous plateau of unwavering light, I see you near the snail-peddling sea, junto al mar caracolero, hoarding pinches of sand, wasting time with birds that wing across a marine loneliness. I look at you and don't believe I'm myself, so stupid, so remote, so abandoned, a kid, just arrived from the provinces, a poet with trim eyebrows and threadbare shoes. You're me, I, who live again, just in from the rain. Your silence and your arms are my own. Your verses, repetitious as grains of oat. Tus versos tienen el grano repetido de la avena. They have that tannic tang of bird and leaf curried water from the forest. All right, young man, now listen. Hang on. Keep your silence until the words ripen in you. Look at and caress things the hands know. Theirs is a blind wisdom. Young man in life, you'd better be a good stoker. Buen fogonero, coal stoker. Don't presume you'll be master of the pen an argonaut, a swan, a trapeze artist between high phrases and the surrounding emptiness. Your obligation is to coal and fire. You must dirty your hands with burnt oil, with smoke from the cauldron. Wash yourself, put on your new suit, and then with heaven in reach you can worry about the lily, take on the orange blossom and the dove, arrive into your radiance without forgetting the state of oblivion, of blackness, without forgetting your own or the earth. Toughen up, take a walk over the sharp stones, then come back. In that same box of manuscripts that includes the Ode to Walt Whitman, Neruda was really, as most of you know, influenced by Whitman, who was first promoted in Latin American by Jose Marti, who actually heard Whitman give a talk on Lincoln, and later in 1887 wrote his own homage to Whitman. But the most influential translation of a selection of Whitman's Leaves of Grass was published in 1912 when Neruda was 8. By the time Neruda wrote this poem, there was a complete translation of Leaves of Grass in circulation. One of the things you'll see come up over here are some photographs I took in Neruda's private library of his Whitman books, and they were extensive, all these different editions. Don't be vain, someone had scrawled on my wall. I don't recognize the script or hand of whoever left that line in the kitchen. No one I invited, clearly. He came in from the roof, so who am I supposed to answer? The wind. Listen to me, wind. For many years, the vainest have tossed in my face their own empty vanities. That is, they show me the door I open at night, the book I write, the bed that waits to receive me, the house I build. That is, maliciously. They make signs with their fingers entwined, their viney fingers, and all their self-love they dump in my face. They call me the things they are. They bark at me their secrets. Maybe I'm vain. I'm also vain. Not about my poetry, I don't think. Well, let's take a look. All my life, it's coursed through my body, like my own blood, which I decode onto this paper. Sometimes I have work to do. They call me, and I don't come. I'm given to write lines I don't read. I'm given to sing for someone who one day I'll never even meet. It's true I get letters that tell me, your words brought back my love. They saved my life. They reached me in prison. And I think that this circulating blood, invisible blood inside me, runs through other veins from now on. But as soon as it leaves me, I've forgotten my poetry. There's no serious vanity in my forgetting or in my creating, nor in my shoes, in my ancient beat-up shoes, bearing my vagrant feet. Every 5 years I get myself a new suit. My wilted ties don't exactly gloat. Now, if at some time when my people are in danger, I check to see if our flag is still flying, I race up the bell towers, forgetting the froth-spitting wave, forgetting the flower on the road. I've done nothing more than others, maybe less than anyone. The next poem is the shortest in the book, and it's the it took me the longest to translate. It was the hardest to translate because it depends upon a conceit that was used in Chilean vernacular in the 40s that not very many people remember. None of my friends did. Finally, somebody's grandmother remembered that in the 40s in Chile, on the coast, abalone was called orejas del mar, little ears of the sea. So this starts out, you can imagine how weird this was to me, trying to figure out. So it starts out as a love poem to his wife's ear. And then it goes, yo no hablo de la pequeña oreja más amada, hecha tal vez de nácar amasado con harina de rosa. No, yo quiero celebrar una oreja. So in the Spanish, I'll read you the English beginning. Love stuff to this woman's ear. And then he says, yo no hablo, I'm not talking about that little ear, most loved, kneaded with rose harina grain, kneaded with rose, what is the word I'm thinking of? Rose flour. And thank you very much, Adam. Con harina de rosa. Yeah, I'm not talking about that that ear. I'm talking about. So I got really lost in there. Marvelous ear, double butterfly, hear your praise. Oh, and here's where I cheat in the English, because what do you do with that? I'm not thinking of abalone, little ears of the sea, most prized perhaps of Naker's gift, kneaded with rose flour. No, I want to revere your ear. There's a nice Chilean phrase for the Chilean traveler, the pata de perro, the dog's foot that leaves his homeland. Neruda has a poem for the pata de perro. If they put a boat near a Chilean, he jumps in. He exiles himself and is lost. The rich man heads to Vesuvius and doesn't notice the maternal heights, the high Andean flame. He flies to Broadway, to the Mayo Clinic, to the Moulin Rouge. The poor Chileno, with only his shoes, crosses into Nequén, the forsaken territories of Patagonia. He hikes the lunary shorelines of Peru. He sets his hunger down in Colombia, migrates as he can, changing stars like shirts. The Chilena is a crazy woman with railing eyes, an amiable heart, sky blue skin. Or he's the traveling salesman with his wine, guitars, water pipes. Or he could be the sailor who gets married in Veracruz and never comes back to his island, to his fragrant oceanic Chiloe. As most of you also know, I'm sure, Neruda grew up in the country, in the provinces, and he came into Santiago at the age of 17 to cut his teeth with the big poets and to see what was happening there. And when he got there, what was happening were that workers were protesting, and in a very organized campaign against them, policemen on horseback were wiping them out with batons and beating them and terrorizing them. This came to be known as the White Terror. At that point, it was known as a wave of patriotism. Sound familiar? So this is Neruda thinking about being 17 and trying to be a real poet in the big city. I rolled beneath hooves. The horses passed over me like cyclones. The moment clutched its flags, and riding the student fervor, it blew into Chile. Sand and blood from niter quarries, coal from back-breaking mines, copper extracted into the snow with our blood. And so the map was changing. The pastoral nation bristled into a forest of fists and horses. And before I turned 20, I received, amid the blows of police cudgels, the throbbing of a vast subterranean heart. And in safeguarding others, I understood their lives were my own. And I came by friends who will defend me to the last, because my poetry, barely even shucked, received the honor of their agonies. Let's see what we have here. All right, I'll read this. I haven't read this one before out loud. It has a very skinny line. It's dated April 26th, 12:30 p.m. Not a date though. In Los Guindos. Might have been 1952 when Neruda returned to Chile after his exile. It sort of points to the heights of Machu Picchu, where Neruda explores a similar theme, and the Andes and mining both come up. Snow-pelted cordilleras, white Andes, walls of my homeland, so much silence. They hem in the will, the struggles of my people. Above the silvered mountains, below the green thunder of the ocean, still, these people scratch at their bristling lonelinesses. They steer through sheer waves, and in the afternoon they find a guitar and go for a walk singing. My people never hold back. I know where they come from and where they'll go someday with that guitar. That's why I'm not unnerved by the bloody sun hung out over the whiteness, the spectral cordillera shuddering down the roads. My people toughened their hands, quarrying jagged minerals. They know hard times, and they go on. They keep on. We Chilenos, a poor people, miners, fishermen, we want the taste of what's happening apart from the snow. We scan the sea for messages and news. We're holding on. Come winter, the Andes lay out their infinite tablecloth. Mount Aconcagüa's hoary mane freezes to its white head. The Grand Cordilleras sleep, the peaks covered with the same vast sheet. The rivers harden up all across the planet. Snow keeps falling, a multiplicity of shivers. But come spring, death's mountains are reborn. The waters once again a living substance, a song, and a forgotten weed pokes up. Later, everything scented with sweet mint or heady araucarias. Beneath the mournful flight of condors, the herons shoot out from the silence. Then the whole Cordillera gives itself back to the Chilenos, and between the sea and the peaks, fires fan out. Spring swishes across the mountain with its suit of breezes. Yellow flowers pour gold fragrance into the earth's old scars. Everything moving, everything in flight, coming and going, the news of the world. Tendriling forth of history, footsteps of conquistadors overcome by sheer labor, and taller than the highest rocks is man at the crest of the Andes, mankind, the invincible expansion, the advance of the people, and at the snow-covered pinnacle, lifting his head, his hands still holding a shovel, the Chilean looks up without fear, without sadness. The snow, the sea, the sand, all of it is his road. We'll keep up the fight. This is a poem that's dated October 17th, 1958, and it's found in a notebook with elementary odes written on the cover and To the King of Clubs written on the first page. Comes back from his blaze, the fireman, from his star, the astronomer, from his disastrous passion, the obsessive, from 1,000,000 whatever, the ambitious, from the naval knight, the sailor, the poet returns from his slabber, the soldier from fear, the fisherman from his wet heart, the mother from Juanito's fever, the thief from his nighttime high, the engineer from his frosted rose, the native from his hunger, the judge from fatigue and unsureness, the jealous from his torment, the dancer from her exhausted feet, the architect from the 3,000th floor, the pharaoh from the 10th life, the hooker from her lycra and falsies, the hero comes back from oblivion, the poor from another day gone, the surgeon from staring down death, the fighter from his pathetic contract. Someone returns from geometry, stepping back from his infinity, the explorer, the cook from her dirty dishes, the novelist from a web of lies, the hunter puts out the fire and returns, the adulterer from rapture and despair, the professor from a glass of wine, the schemer from his backstabbing, the gardener has shuttered his rose, the bartender stoppers his liquor, the convict takes up his plea again, the butcher washes his hands, the nun quits her prayers, the miner his slick tunnel, and like the rest, I take off my clothes. Inside the night of all men, I make a smaller night for myself. My woman joins me. Silence bears down, and dream spins the world again. In January, C.D. Wright and I went to, I'd been before, but I was able to take C.D. to the 3 houses of Neruda. And because I was working on these translations, we were sort of treated to a private tour where I saw this black telephone that's going to feature prominently in this next poem. And that those of you who remember watching those old 50s movies, it's those really dull black telephones that Neruda had and hated. That's in Isla Negra. And this is found, this really curious title, it's found in a notebook which on the first page begins in Neruda's hand, I began on the first days of January 1973, parentheses, sick in bed with a bad hip, end of parentheses, book titled Chosen Defects and Others, Secret Poems. And it stayed secret. From isolation, from the hostile bonehead I've always been, since even before I was born, between pride and the terror of living without being loved, I've come to shake hands with all the world, and without wanting to at first, I've let myself take phone calls. Suffering a voice, some advice through a wire, a metallic transmission, until finally I took leave from myself and raising my arms as though before a pointed gun, I gave in to the degradations of the telephone. I, who conducted myself with such singular tact, backing away from sterile offices, from offensive industrial palaces, only to see some black apparatus that even with its silence insults me. Me, a poet clumsy as a duck on land, degrading myself to the point of yielding my superior ear, which I had consecrated innocently to birds and music, to this everyday prostitution, affixing my ear to an enemy trying to take control of my being. I came to be a telefiend, a telephony, a sacred telephant. I prostrated myself whenever the ringing of that horrid despot demanded my attention, my ears and blood, when a voice mistakenly asked for technical information or an escort, or it was a relative I detested, a forgotten aunt wholly objectionable, a national prize alcoholic who longed to smack me, or a blue-tinged syrupy actress who wanted to violate me, seduce me with her pink telephone. I've changed clothes, roles. I'm all ears. I live trembling that they won't call me, or that they will, those idiots. My anxiety is medication-proof. Doctors, priests, politicians, maybe I'm turning myself into a telephone, an abominable black lacquered instrument through which others communicate the contempt they'll devote to me when I'm good for nothing but the wasps that converse across my body. So maybe I'll end with this poem. Is it? I have no idea. Yeah, this seems like we're about right. 6:43. This is found in a folder with copies of Neruda's Ode to a Spoon. No one had seen it before. It's my favorite poem in the collection. Neruda's writing this during the middle of the space race, and he's been able to travel to Russia a couple times, and he's kind of got the hots for the cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova. And he says in a speech there in Russia that the journey to the cosmos has been incomplete until a woman went and came back from there. I think he adds, and such a beautiful woman. Those two solitary men, those first men up there, what of ours did they bring with them? What from us, the men of earth? It occurs to me that the light was fresh then, that an unwinking star journeyed along, cutting short and linking distances, their faces unused to the awesome desolation in pure space, among astral bodies polished and glistening like grass at dawn. Something new came from the earth, wings or bone coldness, enormous drops of water, or surprise thoughts, a strange bird throbbing to the distant human heart. And not only that, but cities, smoke, the roar of crowds, bells and violins, the feet of children leaving school. All of that is alive in space now, from now on, because the astronauts didn't go by themselves. They brought our Earth, the odors of moss and forest, love, the crisscrossed limbs of men and women, terrestrial rains over the prairies. Something floated up like a wedding dress behind the two spaceships. It was our spring on Earth, blooming for the first time, that conquered an inanimate heaven, depositing in those altitudes the seed of our kind. Pretty good lost poems, man. Yeah. No, if anyone wants to ask questions, Jura, I knew you weren't going to take your scarf off, and I didn't either. Yeah.
But I'm also very happy. I mean, I promote curiosity, but if you all just want to talk,
That's right. If anybody wants to talk, I'd be glad to listen too. I know I recognize some translators in here. How many people do translations who are here? You too. Adam, what are you keeping your hands down for? You need to. Yeah. All right. So I think I'm really interested in translation and how it connects us to not just other languages and cultures, but other modes of perhaps other modes of being that language offers up, and I'm mostly excited about people translating contemporary writers that haven't been translated, and so one of the things I've often said is the last thing that we need is another Neruda translation. But then these came, and they were really worth bringing across. There's a translator here, a Korean translator. That's one of the languages that, Jess, that's sort of the least contemporary poetry from an Asian language. I mean, Chinese and Japanese get translated much more than Korean does. So I'm really glad you're working on that.
Some of these photographs,
Yeah.
are these books that are in his collection?
Yeah, these are all in his private library, so you don't you can't see these unless Dario Osis brings you into them. But yeah, they're all just ones I photographed that interested me. A huge his reading habits were expansive and multilingual.
Was he as interested in Berriman as the selection makes it seem?
It's really curious. He really was into Berryman, and had multiple editions. That's one of the reasons I photographed them, because it surprised me too. The Whitman I was expecting.
And the last question I have is that a little outhouse you're photographing? Sometimes it comes back, there's two different images of it. Little tiny building.
It's a beautiful little, it's like a tea house on his property, outside the house, grown over.
So, but that's, what is that used for?
It was used for tools, a tool shed, yeah. It was my tea house. Wow, yeah.
Thank you. I mean, kind of an obvious question for this. You have these beautiful poems and a beautiful reading of yours, but the poems, some of them are incomplete. How do you deal with a poem that's incomplete? How do you translate? Do you invent something? Do you convey the incompleteness?
Yeah. Well, let's look at Sappho. One of the things that sort of began to champion modernism was the notion that you could translate the incompleteness, and that fragmentation could still offer up enough of a glimpse at the essence, at the soul that was worth doing. So Pound's famous translation, spring, too long, Gangula, which is a woman's name. That's a complete poem for me, though most of the poem is missing. He left in the incompleteness, whereas other translators before then had filled in with a lot of what they were guessing it might be. Yeah.
You read only the really complete version.
No, hombre, yeah. No, some of the poems that I read end in commas or end without periods. I'm not like, giving you the makeup version, that's pretty representative of what's in the collection. Michael. Hi.
Is it possible to talk about how you approached the sound of that you saw and heard in the originals and brought that into English?
Yeah, that's one of the things, like you would be, Michael, that I'm most conscious of trying to do. Not only is Neruda imagistically sort of pyrotechnical, but the sound of his work is so much a part of its meaning that sometimes I stray from any kind of strict semantic translation in order to recover sound qualities that I think carry an emotion even more importantly in sections.
And I'm not doing this for physical exercises, it's just to record you all.
So, well, I mean, glad to say anything, but I'm terrified of like keeping you here when you want to go out into the dark night.
I think we'll all come and commune with you more directly.
Okay,
How's that?
all right.
And I will.
Oh, this one. There's a cafe in Valparaiso. In the cafe, which is a real cafe, you go and have bar and coffee there. There's this life-size Neruda with Huidobro sitting across from me. And then Nicanor Parra, the great Chilean poet who sort of comes after Neruda, people didn't know what to do. Everyone just wrote imitation Neruda poems until Nicanor Parra comes along and introduces a real street vernacular and mathematical games. He has an engineering degree, like Raul Zurita. And Nicanor Parra, I also went to see on this trip with CD. He made a pass at her, in fact. He's 102 years old. He got up and grabbed hold of her arm and wouldn't let her go. And he built his house in Valparaiso facing away from, with its butt to Neruda's house, because he didn't want, because he'd grown up with Neruda as the aura, and he was really tired of it. So very purposeful architectural construction. And his house faces where Huidobro is buried. Those three great Chilean poets.